Hello, I'm Zeke, and welcome to the Zeekly Podcast. Let's talk Pennsylvania. The guest I have today is a lifelong resident of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. He's a father, teacher, commissioner, and now running as a Democrat for Congress in PA's 1st Congressional District. Thank you so much for being here, Bob Harvie.
I'm Zeke, a doctor, a Pennsylvanian, and an unapologetic supporter of democratic values. You might have seen me on social media working my ass off for Democrats and meeting some pretty amazing people along the way, like President Barack Obama and Governor Josh Shapiro. For years, I've knocked thousands of doors all over Pennsylvania and poured my heart and soul into supporting candidates and causes that make a difference, from local school board races to national elections. The personal is political, and I take every election in Pennsylvania personally. Where the mainstream media has failed you, I will give you truth and independence. You'll hear from Democratic leaders, candidates, and change makers who are working to improve the health of the Commonwealth, and it won't be boring as hell. No matter where you are, I'll meet you with hope and a plan to make your community better one day at a time. Welcome to the Zeekly Podcast. Let's talk Pennsylvania.
Oh, thank you, Zeke. No, I'm honored to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
I'm super excited that you're here. Now, this is not your first time on a podcast, correct? You've done podcasts before.
We actually started a podcast series at the county when we took over in 2020, flipping control of the Bucks from Republican to Democrat for the first time in almost 40 years. One of the things we focused on was communications. We really felt like people didn't know enough about county government, and there needed to be a lot more transparency. And one of the things we did was start a podcast that talks about different county agencies, county programs. So I've been on a couple of them.
That's great. Well, this should be a chip shot for you. This race is super important, and we're going to learn all about you, your campaign, and play some games. You ready?
Sure. Sounds good.
All right. Well, first question I have to ask is, what made you decide to run for Congress? It's a really big deal.
Yeah, it is. Really big deal. It was something that I had been thinking about for a while, and people had been asking me to consider it for several years. It certainly is a big change from being a high school social studies teacher, which is what I did for 26 years before I became a commissioner. I really I started answering that question with a question, which they always say is a trait of Irish people, and I'm mostly Irish, so I don't know if it's true or not. But I answered when people said, "Why are you? Why do you want to be in Congress, or why do you want to run for this office?" I said, "Well, how could I not? Look at where we are as a country. Look at where we're heading, which is not a place I think most of us want to envision ourselves heading, or never thought that we'd envisioning ourselves heading as a country." And I just felt like I had to step up. I was raised in a family that was very, very big on public service. My grandmother, Irish Catholic, had a bust of John Kennedy on her dining room server really to the day she died.
Oh, nice.
I was raised in that tradition of the Kennedy belief that government service was a noble thing, that if you saw a problem, you didn't look around and wait for somebody to fix it, you fixed it. I moved to Falls Township back in 1999 and got involved in local government. I became a committee person for the Democratic Party, and just felt like I wanted to do something to make my community the best it could be, and so I ran for commissioner. And now here we are, with this race being very critical. This is very much as a very swing county. Austin Davis calls it the swingiest county and the swingiest state in America. And the district obviously is mostly Bucks County with a sliver of Monco. So it's time for change. It really is something I felt like I needed to step up.
I agree. I'm really happy that you're starting now as well. The primary isn't until next year, the general later in the year, November next year. But now is the time to start getting to know everyone and let them know that you're coming, and that, the current congressman needs to look in his rearview mirror because Bob Harvie's coming for a seat. I'm extremely grateful you're running. I unfortunately am not part of the Monco that can vote for you. But if you're ever in the lower area,
move, or you can move. It's not so fun.
My kids would not appreciate that. But if you're ever in the area, I will give you the lower Marion welcome. I promise you that.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good.
Well, you grew up in Bucks County, and so I think it's only fitting to play What the Buck, all right? Okay. Where we are going to do some trivia that make you say, what the buck, all right?
Okay.
It is illegal to sleep on top of this outside in Bucks County. What do you think? Obviously you must know growing up in Bucks, you tell people just don't sleep outside on this. What do you think it is? These are actual laws that are still on the books,
Boy, I'm going to go with an odd one and say refrigerator.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
So you do know Bucks County.
What the buck? Yes.
What the buck, man? All right, you got the first one right. All right. You can sing in a lot of places in Bucks County, but it is illegal to sing in this. What can't you sing in Bucks County of all places?
Why can't you sing in Bucks
Yeah, what
County?
can't you sing in? I mean, to me, you already won this game because you got the first one right. So it's all, this is just gravy now.
I like trivia.
Uh-huh.
I get very, very competitive. So I'm going to I know I don't want to take up the entire podcast trying to think of the answer to this one question.
It's a bathtub.
You can't sing in the bathtub.
Can't sing in a bathtub. Not in Bucks County,
Huh.
unfortunately. I know.
But you can
All
sing
right,
if you're on top of a refrigerator though. You're
oh,
allowed to do
yes, on
that.
a refrigerator, you're fine, but not in a bathtub, okay?
Okay.
All right, I have two more for you. It is illegal to catch this with your bare hands in Bucks County.
I'll say fish.
That is correct. Very good. I mean, I didn't know any of these, so you're doing a great job. What the buck, man? Here's the last one. Fall Fest at Shady Brook Farm in Bucks County includes the Pumpkin Fest, which features a contest where participants race while wearing what?
I've been to Fall Fest too. I don't know if I've ever seen the race. While wearing what? Are they wearing I don't know, overalls?
Oversized clown shoes.
Oh, what the buck?
What the buck, man?
Yeah.
I know. Look, you got 2 out of
Jeez,
4.
I should have got that's batting 500. That's all right.
You did a great job.
Yeah.
Well, you know more about bucks than I do. That's for darn sure. You were a high school social studies teacher for 26 years. What was your favorite part of teaching?
I really liked working with kids. I taught at Bucks County Technical High School in Lower Bucks County. I was there for 20 years. I taught 9th and 10th graders, and I was lucky that a lot of times I got kids 2 years in a row. It is neat to watch that development happen of the scared kid who comes in first day of freshman year of high school, when they don't necessarily know a whole lot of people, and it's a very uncomfortable year for them. I still maintain it's the most difficult year of high school, 9th grade, and then by the end of I've had 2 years. By the end of sophomore year, you've really watched them develop and find their stride in a lot of ways. So I think that's working with the kids is the best part.
And when did you retire?
I retired when I became a commissioner. Yeah, it was
okay.
Yeah, January of 2020. So yeah, I taught right up really, to Christmas break.
I mean, being a teacher is such an important job, and I am grateful that you did it as a profession. And I hope that if there's any teachers out there, I'm just extremely grateful of what they do for the children in the Commonwealth and across the country. It's very important teaching the future minds of America. Why are you a Democrat? And why do you choose to represent the Democratic Party?
Yeah, it's the easy answer is I was born a Democrat. I joke about the fact that I was born and raised on Roosevelt Street in Bristol. So my political philosophy was determined at birth. But my parents are Democrats, and their parents are Democrats, and I came up believing that the Democratic Party stood for fairness. It stood for, working class values. It was the party that was going to protect you from those who would abuse you, and big businesses, and sometimes the government even. It was the party that was going to stand up for civil rights. It was the party that was going to fight for economic empowerment for people, for unions. The party that really looked into the future and tried to prepare you for it. I've never wanted to be anything other than a Democrat from the time I understood really what the difference was between the parties. But I do feel that our party, the Democratic Party, has not lived up to a lot of what it was based on over the past 4 decades or so. I think we've lost a lot of our base. They think that Donald Trump is there for them, and clearly he's not. He doesn't care about working class people. He doesn't care about unions. He doesn't care about helping people get that opportunity so they can be the best they can be and live their American dream. He doesn't care about that. He cares about himself. I talked about Kennedy earlier, and I think back about how far we've come from having a president who said, ask not, what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Now we have a president who asks, what are you going to do for me? And we need somebody who's fighting for the people of this community, of this district, who are struggling to put food on the table. Because if they're worried about going bankrupt because of a medical expense they didn't see coming, or they're worried about how they're going to put their kids through school, or what they're going to do with their parents when they get older, if they can afford a nursing home, if they need one, wanting to take the kids on a family vacation somewhere, or put in a pool, or fix the house up. If they're worried about those things, then nothing else is really going to get into their mindset about, well, you should be focused on this instead. No, the kitchen table issues are what matters. It's always about how people can make their dreams come true by getting access to good jobs, good education, safe streets, and having that chance to live their best life. That's what the Democratic Party has always meant to me in terms of what they fight for. And I'm proud to be wearing that and proud to be fighting for those issues.
I really appreciate it. I always enjoy asking that question because I was not always a Democrat. I grew up in a conservative household, and certainly when Donald Trump was elected the first time, I realized what a mistake I'd been making for such a long time. So I'm very grateful that you represent the Democratic Party and their values, and I know it's going to carry you far in life.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you're doing. I don't know the statistic. I know it's incredibly lopsided in terms of right wing versus, I'll say, left wing, podcasts and radio shows and everything else. But yeah, we need people fighting, and you're fighting.
Absolutely. This is my contribution to the Pennsylvania Democrats.
Yeah. On behalf of one Pennsylvania Democrat, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, there are a number of people who believe this, that the current congressman serving in PA1, Brian Fitzpatrick, is a moderate Republican. And I don't understand how he continues to pull the wool over the voters' eyes.
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to the simple issue that you and I pay more attention to politics than most people do. Most people don't pay attention to how votes go down in Washington. They just don't. They don't have the time. They're taking kids to soccer practice, dance class. They're working 2 jobs. They're volunteering, they're firefighters, they're doing whatever they're doing. And I think us as a Democratic Party, the mistake we've been making is that we assume that we trust in the better angels of everyone's nature. But I think some of that is our messaging and the fact that we need to get a little better at hitting on some core topics. And it's really about meeting people where they are. What's their prior knowledge? What do they know is going on? Because that's what they have time to pay attention to, and meet them there and start building from there. It's what you do with students. As a party, we have to be better at that. And I think that's one of the things that Brian Fitzpatrick gets by on, which is that, people see him at their kids' little league game, throwing at the first pitch. They see pictures or social media of him at a senior center presenting a big check or something like that. But, they don't pay attention to the fact, and this is going to be my job to make sure they see this. They don't pay attention to the fact that, he's at that little league kid game, but, he's not standing up for the Department of Education, which is going to make sure those kids get education. He's not standing up for cuts that are happening to the VA. He voted for a budget. I know he likes to talk about how, he voted against the Trump budget. Well, the vote you have to pay attention to is when that bill came out of the House back in May, and it passed by one vote. It only got to the Senate because of one vote, and he voted for it.
And he voted for it. That's right.
He voted for it. And that was a bill that, because this is the thing, it kills me. He says, well, I sent it to the Senate thinking it would get better. Well, what? Why are you voting for? And the thing he voted for increased the federal debt by $3.8 trillion. $3.8 trillion. It added. It cut Medicaid by I think it was around $700 billion. It cut SNAP by about $260 billion. It was going to add tens of billions of dollars of responsibility for the states to have to pick up. And that's what he voted for. And then it got worse. It's the little inside baseball that people just don't have the time to pay attention to. And he's been living off of that. But that's going to change.
And Mitch McConnell's money as well.
Right.
I mean, Mitch McConnell is a huge campaign donor for Brian Fitzpatrick. I mean, I love that you bring up the voting record, because if you live in PA1, please, his voting record is terrible. He didn't vote to impeach Trump for treason. He voted for the current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, right? Who believes that women should be home having children and not working. He did, as you said, vote for the first iteration of the big bullshit bill. And he voted to prevent the release of the Epstein Files. I mean, when he is the swing vote, he votes with the more right-wing Republicans every single time. He is not a moderate Republican. He's a MAGA Republican. He is.
Yeah. He said of all these times he talks about being bipartisan, not one single vote that he's given has actually made a difference. Correct. Anytime he votes against his party, it's when they've already got it won anyway, or they know they're going to lose by a ton. And they say, they give him permission. Oh, go ahead, Brian. You're allowed to vote no on this. Go ahead. He's definitely not there when it counts. It is frustrating. And it's my job and our job to sort of make sure people see that and understand what's going on.
Well, that's what we're trying to do right now on the Zeke Me podcast. And the buck stops with the voters always, but certainly in Bucks County, we need to make a referendum and get you elected as next congressman of PA1 next year.
Well, I hope so.
Well, let's play moderate or MAGA. Okay. I'm just going to give you a couple little sentences and you're going to tell me, well, that's moderate or that's MAGA. All right.
Okay.
All right. So how about eliminate birthright citizenship? Is that a moderate position or a MAGA position?
Well, it's an unconstitutional position, but I'll go MAGA.
There you go. Very good. Off to a good start. What about codify reproductive rights?
Well, that's a moderate. Yeah.
Very
Mhm.
good. And what about cut funding for Medicaid? Is that a moderate position or a MAGA position?
Well, it's a cruel position, so MAGA.
You got it. What about student loan forgiveness? Is that a MAGA position or a moderate position?
That's a moderate position, yeah, and a smart
Correct.
one.
Yes, I agree. And what about prohibit stock trading in Congress? Is that a moderate position or a MAGA position?
That's, I'll be honest with you, to me, that should be it's a moderate position.
Mhm.
I don't think members of Congress should be trading stock when they're in office.
Absolutely. It's important that people know where you stand on these positions because
Mhm.
we need someone like you to reverse a lot of damage that's been done by the current congressman and a lot of Republicans in Congress.
Yeah.
You initiated and ran the Beyond the Books program, which
Mhm.
brought dozens of military veterans from World War II and the War on Terror into classrooms to share their experiences with students while you were a teacher.
Mhm.
What inspired you to start that program?
And was raised in a family of veterans. My dad was in the Army in the early 60s. And my mom has 5 brothers. All 5 served in the military, 1 in Korea, 2 in Vietnam, and the other 2 brothers were sort of in between those 2 wars.
Five uncles who all served in the military. That must have
5
been
uncles, and
wow.
my grandmother had 4 brothers, all served in World War II. So I've had relatives in service to this country. If Ancestry.com can be believed, back to the Revolution.
Oh wow.
So including losing my 3-time great grandfather was in the Union Army, was killed in action at Fredericksburg,
Oh,
fighting for the Unions.
honorable cause.
It's always been something that was very close to me. And as a department chair, really at Buckstown Technical High School, there was another teacher who had this idea. He brought in a veteran that he knew, just as kids, to talk about World War II. And we started talking about it. I said, we could probably do something like this on a big scale. In the first year, we had 60 World War II veterans. And unlike a lot of programs that schools run, I'm not criticizing other schools because anytime you have a veteran come in, it's valuable. We didn't have them like in the auditorium with all the kids gathered around. We had them in small groups, and we had them in something like 30 or 40 different classrooms. And kids rotated for the first half of a school day, just meeting somebody who was at D-Day, or somebody who liberated a concentration camp, or somebody who fought in the South Pacific, and it grew from there. In terms of the number of veterans was always pretty much the same, but we started adding in Korean veterans, Vietnam veterans, War on Terror. We started adding Cold War veterans who really hadn't served overseas in a conflict, but they were in Germany or in South Korea. And it really helped the kids understand a bunch of things. Number one, and I always emphasize this, that all the people we found were local. They were from Bucks County, some from Montco, some from Philly, but I used to tell the students, I said, these are people that you walk past in the mall. They're your next door neighbors. They live, and they have these incredible stories that history is all around you. And also understanding how complex the military is, just because you had kids that, all they know is, well, now it's like Call of Duty and the video games or movies and things, and it's all always focused on combat. I said, for every 1 soldier in combat, there are about 9 who serve some support role. But one of the people who came for a long time was a dentist who served in the U.S. Army, and he was a dentist in the U.S. Army.
That's cool.
And it was the kids, and especially in technical high school, where you've got kids who are dental hygienist students or allied health students, in the classroom, and they're thinking that, yeah, this is, and the kids had never thought about it. You need a dentist in
Yeah,
the Army. If you're in the military, yeah,
that's
you
right.
need a dentist. Sure.
Yeah, I remember if you've ever taken a tour of the USS New Jersey,
Mm.
I took my kids and there was a whole room that was just dedicated to dental work. They had the
Yeah.
dental chairs in there and everything, so that when the sailors were out at sea for months at a time, if they had a cavity or whatever, they could go to a dentist while they were out on the ocean. So yeah, that's a great story.
But I had several veterans who told me afterwards or during the program that they'd never spoken about their time in the
Oh wow.
military, and that this was the first time they'd ever done it, and they felt like just being in it, and even if they're in a room with other veterans, and I was usually mix up who was there, so you could have a Korean War veteran, a World War II veteran, a Vietnam veteran, and somebody who'd been in Afghanistan, and you're hearing from all of them, and you're going to get a chance to get a firsthand view of that primary source that you can't replace.
That's extremely powerful. I think it's great that you started that program. I hope it's still ongoing. Veterans sacrifice so much for this country,
Mm-hmm.
some of them with their lives, a lot of them
Yeah.
with parts of their body, and even psychologically.
Yeah.
So they deserve so much. And I really appreciate you giving them that platform to share with the younger generation.
Oh, thank you.
People in this country are angry at what is happening, myself included. And they are looking for people with the spine, people who will not back down from extremism of the Republican Party.
Mhm.
What can you say to people to convince them that you will be their defender in DC?
Watch any of the meetings that I've had as a commissioner for the past 5.5 years. It hasn't, well, it started after COVID when we started getting attacked by people on the right
Mhm.
for masking kids and closing schools and forcing vaccinations on people and really some really disturbing stuff.
Mhm.
The 2020 election, we were the center of the storm
Yeah.
in this county. We really had to make sure that we were doing things exactly the right way because we knew that we were going to get challenged, and we were. 11 times we were sued by the RNC or by the Trump campaign, 11 times after the 2020 election. We won all 11 suits because we had made sure we dotted every I and crossed every T, and we followed the law. And we didn't shrink from any of the personal attacks or the accusations. Certainly they came after me when I ran for 2019, called me, all sorts of bad things, that I was going to bring hazardous waste into Bucks County, which is just sort of
Mhm.
very idiotic. And obviously didn't work. And then in 2023, I was a corrupt politician who was cozy with corrupt labor unions from Philadelphia, which didn't go over well with or unions in Philadelphia. They were not happy about being called corrupt. And so, that obviously didn't work either. I'm not shying away from a fight.
Good.
If I was going to shy away from a fight, I never would have ran for commissioner. Even when I ran for township supervisor, it was my election flipped control of that board,
Right.
and that was not an easy race. I'm in this to win. I've never lost an election. I'm not going to lose this one.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. All right, Bob, I need to hear it. Say, I'm Bob Harvie and I have a spine.
I'm Bob Harvie, and I have a spine.
Yes. All right, Bob Harvie for Congress. Let's go. The year to the day you were sworn into office as a Bucks County Commissioner, our nation's capital was attacked by a mob of violent insurrectionists, goaded on by Trump and Republican politicians. And the current Republican congressman serving in your district voted against convicting Trump for treason. What did that day mean to you? And how would you address election integrity while in Congress?
It was tough to process. It honestly was. In my mind, I was envisioning something that wasn't nearly the size of what was actually going on. I was imagining, a handful of people who are causing trouble. I wasn't imagining thousands. I wasn't imagining, them using bear spray and pepper spray to assault police officers and using flagpoles to assault police officers and threatening to kill police officers and the vice president. I wasn't envisioning members of Congress clutching gas masks and the House representatives and having to run for their lives. That was something I wasn't, kind of imagining. Even when I was finally seeing it, it was something that you see happening in other countries, not here. The thing that kind of bothers me the most is how anybody who defends the president, who created that situation, or any of the people who excuse it, how any of them can claim to be pro law enforcement, is really kind of is disgusting to me. Because if you're pro law enforcement, you should have been furious then, and you should have been furious, what was it, 6 months ago or so, when the president pardoned 1,500 of those people. It certainly sets an incredibly disturbing precedent. Certainly with integrity of elections, until we have news agencies and politicians who stand up and tell the truth, all of them, that our elections are fair, that our elections are conducted by professionals in counties around the country. And until we have that, we're really never going to get past the belief being as widespread as it is that there's something fundamentally flawed in our election process. I was a committee person for a long time, so I worked outside the polls at my precinct for a long time. The first election I worked, I was, I think, 12 years old. My uncle was running for mayor in Bristol Borough, and I went door knocking and doing lit drops, and I worked outside the polls on election day and got the count and rode around on my bike to, share the numbers from different machines. As a committee person, as an adult, I was there before polls opened, and I stayed until polls closed and went in afterwards and did the count sitting next to the Republican committee person and comparing numbers, making sure numbers were right, and just, kind of talking about the day. I didn't know how complex the system really was until I became a commissioner and got on the board of elections. And you really learn how necessarily and complicated it is intentionally, and how skilled and professional the people are who work the elections in Montgomery County, Bucks County, every county in this country. That's really where the work gets done. And they take their job incredibly seriously. And you would have no idea when you walk through these offices what political party these people registered as. And so I bristle really when people talk about, elections being stolen, because they say, well, who are you talking about? I'm not there counting votes. I'm not down there like, one over here, one over. I'm not doing that. That's not my job. That's the job of the dozens of people who work in our board of elections in Bucks County and all the county employees who come and work on election day to help them do their jobs. And so you're calling them criminals. That's what you're doing, really. And these are people who this is a job for them. They take it seriously and they're good at it. And so that's the thing that really bothers me.
I'm extremely grateful that you were one bothered by what happened on January 6th, because not everyone is bothered by it. And I am very grateful that you respect the integrity of our elections and agree that all the investigations have shown that our elections are still at this time free and fair.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people who work during election day all across the Commonwealth, they don't get paid. Committee people don't get paid.
Right.
The people who count ballots, they're volunteers. And democracy works because we choose to show up and make it work.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that you have been doing this for your county and all the people who show up every single year for elections across the Commonwealth. Republicans in Congress blocked the release of the Epstein Files, while Democrats voted to release them. Would you have voted to release the Epstein Files?
Absolutely. I don't care who's on them. I mean, I would have voted to release the Matt Gaetz report as well.
Yeah.
If you really want to have transparency, you would really want to call people out. I know that now there's some buzz about the abuse case that Jim Jordan was involved in at Ohio State. And it's important to keep in mind that there was a time when Jim Jordan was running for Speaker of the House a couple of years ago.
That's
and
right.
Brian Fitzpatrick voted for him twice for Speaker of the House.
That's not very moderate, I don't think.
No, it's not very smart.
There's nothing moderate about that, which is not surprising. Yeah, I mean, it's just every accusation is a confession, I feel like, for these Republican politicians. They accuse everyone else of being, dangerous to children and dangerous to other Americans. But I mean, they are literally the swamp that they refuse to drain. Right.
Absolutely.
These are people that have actually hurt other human beings, and they're protecting the person who was a convicted rapist, who is our current president. And is anyone surprised that they don't want the Epstein Files released? I mean, it's all there. We don't really have to have it released to know what's in there, but I'm glad at least that you would want that transparency for anyone who's in it, whether they are a Republican or a Democrat. Right. I think that we can both agree that if you've committed a crime, you deserve to be punished for that. So I'm glad to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
The most common cause of death for children in America is gun violence. What would you do to help address this senseless crime against children? I
know the NIH has wanted to do work on studying gun violence, and of course Congress has blocked them. Or I should say Republicans in Congress have blocked them. I think everybody really knows or should know that we have a gun problem in this country. And I'm speaking as someone who is a gun owner. There is a common sense that needs to be in place here. We're in Pennsylvania. Hunting is a way of life for a lot of people in this Commonwealth, and that's fine. I mean, it's if people want to go hunting, it's whatever they're hunting, and they're doing it, safely and intelligently, and it's, parents teaching their children how to do it a safe way and respect for the firearm and how to use it. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with law-abiding citizens who want to carry a gun. Of all the lessons I got as I went through education classes, never had a class about what to do when an active shooter comes in your classroom. And I ended up when I was at the Bucks County Technical High School, I ended up on the safety committee, and I wrote the handbook at the time about school safety, including active shooter drills, and actually ran active shooter drills or helped run them at the tech school. And I remember having a conversation with a younger teacher, and he said, well, if someone comes into the school with a gun, he said, how do we make sure no one gets killed? And I looked at him, I said, you can't.
Yeah.
And I was as blunt as I could be. I said, I said, if someone comes into the school with a gun, people are going to die. And he looked at me and I think he was expecting me to give him a sort of like a nice fluffy answer. And I said, no, this is reality. It is a problem that there is a lot of emphasis put on guns being the solution to every problem. And it's not. I mean, if more guns made people safer, we'd be the safest country on earth. Because I believe we have more privately owned, firearms in this country than we have people. And so we need laws that have common sense to them. If you are, convicted of a felony, that should impact whether or not you carry a gun. If you're on the terrorism no-fly list, you probably shouldn't be able to go into a store and buy a gun. Assault weapons are made for battlefields. They're not. They're made to, for soldiers going after soldiers. They're being used in Ukraine right now. There's no place for them on our streets. And the thing that always bothers me again is you can't tell me that police officers are safer with, automatic weapons on the street or semi-automatic weapons on the street. They're not. They're not safer. So
yeah, you're right.
So, I mean, there has to be some common sense here.
Yeah, we're not going to have any common sense gun reform with Republicans in
No,
control. We're just not going to.
no,
It's just time and time again when Republicans say they care about children.
yeah,
How can you care about children when the most common cause of death for children in America is gun violence?
yeah.
That is not a party that respects life.
No, no, and it was really somebody asked this question at the town hall in Horsham a couple weeks ago about Sandy Hook, and I'm a realist when it comes
Mhm.
to a lot of things with politics. I don't expect zebras to change their stripes too quickly or at all, but still, I came out of Sandy Hook believing, okay, no one can be okay with this. No one can make it up an excuse
Mm.
as to why we shouldn't take some kind of action now. And I mean, there's definitely been times when I've really questioned where we're going as a country. That was a serious time
Yeah.
when I
I mean,
really thought that if this doesn't do it, if this doesn't take people and wake them up, I have no idea what will.
well, that's why we need to get more Democrats elected up and down the ballot because they're going to be the only ones that take this epidemic seriously. You have a master's degree in education, and I have to assume it is painful for you to see Trump and Republican politicians dismantle the Department of Education. What do you think you're going to try and do in Congress to try and slow that down?
Well, I'm hoping there's something that can be done because I don't know how quickly this is going to work. I mean, in terms of you're talking January of 2027, it's a long time to do a lot of damage. It's been part of the toughest job I had. Toughest part of my job as a teacher, honestly, was the last couple years I was teaching. I left the classroom again in January 2020, but I prided myself on the fact that I had students and I taught honors kids who were pretty bright kids. They didn't know what political party I was. They would try to figure it out all year because I talked about modern American history. So we talked about the civil rights movement. We talked about the women's movement, all the big social movements of the 60s, the gay
Mhm.
rights movement, everything else. We talked about Nixon, we talked about Clinton, we talked about these controversial presidents and things that happened, and they still couldn't figure out what party I was. Now, that became harder when Trump came into office because now I had students coming into the classroom and they were saying, well, saying things that were completely untrue, factually not even close, but they were hearing it from the president of the United States. And so I had no choice but to correct them but try to do it in a way that they understood that I was focusing on the facts, not on who was stating the untruths. And that was incredibly hard because I could see in the face of students, they were like, kind of questioning, well, what the president said this, he's the president. I think we're seeing the ramifications that people just don't understand the process of how a bill becomes a law, what the powers of government are. And I think we need to get back to that.
And that's exactly what Republican politicians are trying to erase. Because if you keep people out of education, you keep them ignorant, then they will believe whatever you tell them. So dismantling the Department of Education is part of their plan. In Project 2025, it was an open book test that basically said they want to get rid of it because if people can't get educated, then they're not going to know any facts. And so we need a majority back in Congress with Democrats so we can try and slow this destruction of democracy down.
It certainly is disturbing on a level that I don't think people quite understand yet, and I don't know when they will understand it, and I'm afraid that it might be too late, or it's going to be much harder to fix by the time people start to realize, hey, my kid's school doesn't have the funding it used to have. This program isn't there anymore, and
Yeah.
how come? What happened to these extra staff that used to be here to help my kid at study, with study periods and things? And well,
Yeah, it's going to
yeah,
be a lot harder to get those things back.
right,
Well, we're going to play a trivia game, which you like trivia, right? Called Majority Rules. Okay.
okay,
So over the last 40 years, Democrats, when they had full control of both House and Senate in DC, have passed more laws that brought broad, measurable, positive change to the most people in America.
hmm
Okay. That is a fact. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Let's see if we can get the answer. All right.
okay.
So
Put me on the
what did,
spot here. This is
yeah.
this is this is nerve-wracking. Okay, go ahead.
It's okay. So, what did the 103rd Congress pass, which was from 1993 to 1995,
Okay.
okay, that made broad, measurable, positive change to most people in America? This is a big
Uh,
one.
there was a first Clinton term. The motor voter bill is the first thing that pops in my head that expanded access to voting rights, which
That's a
we
good
still
one.
have today. There was also an assault weapons ban, I think, in that time period, the first couple of years before the Republicans came in '94. I haven't
Those,
hit the answer yet, huh?
those are all, no, those are all good ones, but I have the Family and Medical Leave Act.
Like, oh, I forgot
Yeah,
about that one.
FMLA,
Yeah, of course. That's a huge
which
one. Yeah.
guaranteed eligible employees up to 12 weeks of unpaid job
Yeah.
protective leave per family for medical reasons. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's huge.
It
I mean,
is. Absolutely.
FMLA is huge, and that was passed by a Democratic majority in the
Yeah.
House and Senate. All right, here's another one. What about the 111th Congress, which was from 2009 to 2011?
Well, Obamacare, the Affordable Care
There
Act,
you go.
obviously,
That's right,
as
the Affordable Care Act. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep, that is
is
definitely
massive
the
one.
biggest one, right?
Yeah.
30 million Americans gained
Right.
access to healthcare, but that wasn't the only thing. Dodd-Frank and
Mm-hmm.
the Consumer Protection Act, which regulated banks
Mm-hmm.
after the financial crisis, and the Fair Pay Act was
Mm-hmm.
also passed, and also the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which
Mm-hmm.
helped lift the U.S. out of the Great Recession.
Right.
So those were all accomplished by Democratic majorities in the House and Senate at the same time. All right, here's the last one. What about the 117th Congress, which was from 2021 to 2023?
Boy, you could take your pick on this one.
I know there's a lot. There's a lot.
The American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act,
Bingo. Mhm.
or to the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, really, really
Mm.
massive, massive laws. It's funny, as those were being passed, I recognized the fact that I worried about the legacy of them because I understood that none of them were going to be quickly implemented because they're so massive.
Yes.
The CHIPS and Science Act. I mean, that's all this, investments, and that it would take decades for people to realize the impact of these.
Yep.
And I knew that as well, Biden's passing these, Biden won't get the credit for them because it's just going to be by the time people realize how many bridges are getting built and everything else that's going on, it would be many, many years later on. Unfortunately, it's, being borne out. And obviously, more unfortunately, is what this current president's doing to gut a
I
lot of those
know.
laws. And the
With the big,
Republicans allowing him to do it in Congress.
yeah, the big bullshit bill. I mean, those laws that were passed by Biden and the Democrats with the majorities were huge. I mean, they cut child poverty in half, sped up vaccinations during COVID, infrastructure, like you said, creating high-tech jobs. I mean, they helped working class Americans, elderly people, marginalized communities. I mean, this is what Democrats can do when they have power and the
Yeah.
majority.
Yeah.
And that's why we need you to win, because the current congressman, who is not a moderate Republican, who's a MAGA Republican, is not going to want to pass these types of laws because his party doesn't want to pass these kinds of laws. And he is going to vote on party lines when they matter. So you did a great job on that trivia game, but it just goes to show what Democrats can do. What role does social media play in your campaign strategy?
It's a massive role because it's a massive medium. Obviously, we know that people, they're not getting their news from NBC, ABC, CBS, like they did decades and decades ago. People are on their phones constantly. They're picking up social media. They're watching you on TikTok and reels and podcasts and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, we do a lot on social media. Try to post as much as we can, just getting out things that are happening in the campaign, events that are coming up, highlighting anything we're seeing coming out of Washington to make sure people understand where Brian Fitzpatrick really is on these issues. And so, yeah, certainly encourage people to follow us on all the major social media platforms. My website is Bob Harvie for Congress. Last name's Harvie. My grandfather used to say that we spell it right, everybody else spells it wrong.
That's great. It's funny because my last name is spelled Tayler. And my
I
grandfather,
did notice that.
and my grandfather said that O is for ordinary and E is for extraordinary. I can relate on that one. Bob, what gives you hope?
I'm given hope just by the primary numbers for voters in Bucks County. It was a record high gap between Democrats who came out to vote and Republicans. Way, 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 way more Democrats and Republicans. And that gives me hope because we know just from the past decade or so that if there's that big a gap, actually, if there's any gap in the primary in terms of whatever party turned out the most in the primary wins in November. And so I think
It's a great
that gives me
sign.
hope. Yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
that gives me hope. That's great.
Yeah, so that really helps. And I, to the people I talk to every day as I'm talking about my race, and there's definite anger. I worried after November. I didn't know how people would react. I think people went through different stages of how to handle that loss.
I went through all of them, Bob. I
Yeah.
went through all of the various stages after that election.
Yeah, and when people you worry about when they're going to come out of it. When depression certainly hits and sort of hopelessness, and it's turning now to anger and action. And certainly, I don't expect that to change because this administration is not going to suddenly get more competent or less cruel. They're not going to suddenly decide, oh wait, we shouldn't be giving tax breaks to billionaires,
Right.
and cutting health care and support for our seniors and veterans. We should be doing the opposite and helping those groups, and they're not going to do that. So the anger is going to be maintained, and the fact that people are now moving into that feeling and that emotion, and they want action, I think is good for us.
Your hope gives me hope. And my last question for you is, what plans do you have to get yourself through these next few years?
Well, it's all about just working. It's just working. It's relying on people to put their faith in me, which I understand is a big deal. I've won countywide election twice now in the past 6 years, and just some more hope for you and others is that we were elected. Myself and my running mate Diane Marseglia were elected in 2019, but our re-election in 2023, where we won by a huge margin, that was the first time Democratic commissioners who were in power had been reelected since the Civil War. So I asking people to put their faith in me and their trust in me and help me in any way they can. Certainly, we're going to be looking for volunteers when it comes time. We want to get through this November election to get people in the school board races and the borough council and county races, township supervisor races, et cetera, in both counties. We're focused on that, and so we ask you to help them. But when it comes time, if you can contribute to my campaign, thank you. If you can help knock doors, if you can just, repost things we're putting on social media, anything you can do, because, certainly no one wins these things alone. And so while, I'm going to be building, I have a campaign manager, I have a finance director, and we're going to be building out that staff, obviously, as we start moving, closer and closer to November of 2026. But I'm going to be relying on people like yourself, people in Monaco and people in Bucks and people really around the country. We've gotten thousands of contributions to the campaign from as far away as California. Some people who recognize that this is a seat that needs to flip.
Yeah. I mean, if Bucks County is the swingiest county in Pennsylvania, then Pennsylvania is the swingiest state in the union. So we have to take every election seriously.
Mhm.
And I'm really happy again that you are starting now with your campaign because, May 19th, 2026 is the primary in Pennsylvania. I can't vote for you. I wish I could, but I'm going to get your name everywhere as much as I can because we need you to win. It's time for change. It's time for Bob Harvie to get this seat. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I have a feeling we are going to cross paths again.
Well, probably. Yeah, probably. But thanks. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me here on the Zeekly podcast. Stay hopeful and get involved. And until next time, let's keep building a stronger Pennsylvania together.